So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of this afternoon's sessions. My name is Sheena. I'm going to be your chair today. You'll see me hobbling around later on whilst I help Ross with the Q&A at the end of the session. Ross is indeed a seasoned L&D professional with over 15 years of experience in the people field. He is currently Head of Learning at Trainline Limited, a Fellow of the Learning and Performance Institute, and founder of Steal These Thoughts, a blog and newsletter for those passionate about learning, growth, and high performance. And today, he'll be sharing his thoughts on how we can be smarter with tech to boost performance in a hybrid world, which is not bad for somebody who had to step in his chair at about 5 minutes' notice. So with no further ado, I will leave you in Ross's capable hands. Enjoy. We'll talk later.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So that was quite an intro. I feel very egotistical now, listening to all that back. So look, first of all, so I'm not a teacher. This isn't a classroom. What I would love to do today is have more of a conversation, to share some experiences with you, to talk about some of the things that have worked, what I've been doing with a variety of companies. So to help with that, I'm not going to use PowerPoint, which may be a shock to some people. What I am going to do instead, if you can get signal in here, of course, and we're about to find out, right? We're going to use a tool called Mentimeter. So what I would love you to do is to use any device that you've got to scan the QR code or go to menti.com, enter this code here. I'll keep popping it up as we go through the talk. And then I've got a bunch of questions that we'll talk about. I've got a bunch of data to share, and I'd love to get your thoughts on everything that we share here today and make sure this is as collaborative as possible. I can already see one like, thank God, I thought I was going to fail completely. So that's good so far. So I'll give you about another kind of 20, 30 seconds to do that. But like I say, we'll continue to kind of put this up during today's session here. So, oh, look at that, loads of lovely love hearts. I'm just waiting for one of you to do the down vote right there. I'm waiting so I can find out. Right, so first of all, we've kind of done the intro on me already. So this is my lovely Memoji, as you can see here, of me, kind of the exact replica. And there's a couple of things that I do. So one is, as you know, so I'm head of L&D for Trainline. I've been heading up for Trainline for the last 4 years now, in terms of when we were a startup through to a PLC. So it's been a pretty crazy journey, right, in terms of the kind of growth of that organization and in terms of the stuff that we've done there as well. And on the side, kind of doing this by day, and maybe you could say Batman by night potentially, is that I also run a blog and newsletter called Steal These Thoughts, which some of you may or may not know. And I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now, and that is basically kind of a center where I share lots of my research that I've been doing in the L&D field, lots of innovations that we've been kind of experimenting with and testing with different organizations, and basically just sharing, as it says, my thoughts pretty much on the L&D industry and some of the kind of cool new tech and how we can use that as well. So saying all of this, and this is a bit controversial already. I did promise Don I wasn't going to be controversial, but it's a controversial one already. So I want to talk about tech in general. So not just learning tech, but also as L&D professionals, how can we scale our abilities with technology to really prepare ourselves and navigate the kind of future career landscape as well? Because it's pretty evident, right? Digital technology is literally ingrained in us. And at some point, if people like Elon Musk have their way, it will be ingrained in our minds soon as well to allow us to control everything. So in terms of the learning tech industry's best kept secret, I think that is you've probably got what you already need. So you've probably got the tech that you need to actually excel yourself, to actually excel in your organizations. Let me provide some context to that and actually give you some data as to why I think that. So first of all, I want you to just discuss on your table, think about to yourself, how many apps do you think the average workplace offers an employee today? So how many apps on average do you think are available to each of you at your company to use off the top of your head? Anyone want to chuck any guesses? I'm hearing too many quite a bit. Each employee, for each employee. Any guesses? Okay, yeah. 10 to 12 a day. Anyone else? 25, okay. One more, any more? Oh. We're getting deeper into that. I mean, anything that's available in your workplace technology stack. So anything that's available in there for you to use to help you from a performance perspective, that's what I would class as an app in this way. Okay, look, so I'll put you all out your misery. So the number is 88. So according to a report from Okta, which some of you may know, Okta is an identification management and security tool. They have over 20,000 customers worldwide. Loads of you are probably using Okta in your organizations right now for security identification, and you don't know. So when you're logging on through single sign-on, Okta is one of the companies that provides that security. So they have a mass amount of data on understanding how many apps do organizations have, how many people are using them, and just looking at the choices that people have. So already, with my good friend Obama here, you can see 88 apps is crazy. But when we start to actually look at that as a whole and break down what does that mean at different organizational levels, it gets deeper, right? So Okta actually found that 175 apps are available to people in companies with over 2,000 employees. So companies with over 2,000 employees have 175 apps available per person. For companies with less than 2,000 employees, it's 73 apps. I like to think about this as kind of like the Netflix decision fatigue thing. You sit down on a Friday night, you're thinking, hey, I want to watch a film, and you're like, I've got 2 hours to do it. And then instead of watching the film, you spend 2 hours not watching the film and then deciding, I've had enough of this crap, I'm leaving here now, and I'm going to go do something else. We basically have the same problem when it comes to the workplace, because we're saying to individuals, right, we've got all this great tech, and we need you to understand, which tech you want to use. If you have a portfolio of 88 apps, how the hell are you supposed to figure out what is really going to help you and what's not going to help you in terms of the tasks in front of you? So look, this is what I think about when I'm having conversations with my tech teams and we're saying, okay, we've got 80, 90 apps that people have to use. And we start to really think about, well, how many of those apps do we use to their full potential as an organization and as an L&D function in particular? And how many apps are people frequently using in that stack? Because I guarantee you now, if you're going to ask most people in your organization, they would have no idea how many applications that you actually had in that org. They'll probably say to you, yeah, I use Slack, or I use Teams, I'm on SharePoint a few times a week. They're not really going to be looking at the rest of the stuff. But it's bits what we can do around that. So actually, I put this in last minute when I was on the train late last night, so thank God I've written it properly. But Satya Nadella, who is the Microsoft CEO, they actually did a conference yesterday, if anyone saw that, and they were talking about their new workplace technology. And they've actually teamed up with Meta. So obviously Facebook, now Meta. Meta have just launched their new Meta Quest 2, which is super expensive, but it now allows you to kind of jump into the digital realm and have your meetings and Teams experiences there. And basically, Satya said something that was really interesting to me, where he was saying, what Microsoft are trying to do is look at how can doing more with less also means applying technology to amplify what you can do, which I think is really interesting. Because I think from an L&D perspective, budgets are getting cut, resource on Teams is low, there's more tech than ever. How can we help ourselves and people in our organization really understand how do we make most of the technology that we've already got? And of course, the last bit, again, looking at the ROI for, what can we do our organization to achieve what they want to do? Because we've probably all been in conversations where we get really excited about a new program of work. People get super excited about, we need some new technology. We need to go buy something new. Let's go talk to people. But we don't look at the current technology estate that exists. And if we're talking about, on average, there's 88 apps per user, why the hell are we going to keep buying more technology and probably having duplicates of stuff? So what I want to do today specifically is a couple of things. So I've been experimenting for probably the last 2 or 3 years, all during the pandemic, like most of us have, in trying to find the balance of how can we enable performance for people in the workforce to really look at what are the best tools that are available, how can we upskill those people on those tools, how can we take those moments that we usually class as face-to-face moments, so coaching, mentoring, all these different types of sessions, and bring them into that digital world. Now, it's not easy. I haven't got a silver bullet that I'm going to give you today and you're going to go away and take on, but I want to talk through some of that. I think really importantly, I also want to look at how do you enable performance and credibility for yourselves as L&D operators. So how in your careers can you look at how can I make this tech work for me? So how can I look at the applications that I've already got and bring that into my workflow and amplify the work that I'm doing? I'm going to give you some examples of that as well, just to kind of get some ideas going. And then lastly, what we're going to look at is taking key actions to really look at how do we scale digital skills for performance, and how do we look at tech as an enabler and most certainly not a replacement to what we do, because if you see a lot of the AI and robot stuff right now, that's not all going to take over what we do currently, so don't be alarmed by that. So first of all, what I want to show here again from this same Okta report is this is a view of the fastest growing apps in 2021 in today's kind of technology estate for workforces. So some of these you might be familiar with. I don't know if any of you use Figma. Are some of you using Miro as well? Is Miro? I never know. Lattice and Monday.com. Amazon Business is killing it for whatever reason. You know, they're really taking the field there, as we can imagine. So these are the things that Okta see as their 20,000 customers that they're really using in their workforce. Of course, I haven't included the tools that we already know very well, like Slack, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint, because they are classic ones, and we will talk about those soon. So speaking about that, I would love for you to go back to your devices and just very quickly answer this question and let me know, on a daily basis, how many apps do you actually use to do what you need to do at work? And it also gives me a moment to get a cheeky swig of water, by the way. Okay, cool. 10, 12. Too many, yeah, probably. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of variation here, right, in terms of what people are using. So that's really good just to understand and look at, you know, how much do we actually use, like very similarly on our phones, like how many apps do we have on our phones as well. I can tell you as an example, on my phone, I probably have way too many apps that I never use half the time and don't really want to delete because I'm scared that one day, at 1 hour of the day, I'll need to use that said app to help me out. So what we can see here is, look, there's a lot of difference in terms of the amount of kind of technology that we're using. So the hybrid work stack. So hopefully you recognize a lot of these names that you see on your screen here now. They've become big, right? I mean, Zoom's just gone crazy. Zoom's got to Google level where we don't even talk about video conferencing as video conferencing anymore. We call it Zoom. People will say to you, we'll go and do it on Zoom. You know, they've reached that Google status where I've never heard one person say, I'm going to search the internet, I'm going to Google it. So, you know, fair play to Zoom and fair play to those people that bought shares in Zoom before all of that. You've done very well. But look, we can see here, and this again is coming from the data from Okta and data that I've seen from research that we've been doing with my own organization as well, that these are fundamentally some of the top apps that people are using day in, day out. And what I generally find in a lot of companies is that those top two of kind of Teams and Slack, where a lot of collaboration is taking place, people don't know how to use more than 10% of those tools. So when I say to people, you know, what are you doing on Slack? I'm messaging other people. That's it. That's like, I'm messaging other people, you know? Are you using workflows? Are you using autoresponders? Are you using bots to help you out? Are you tracking keywords? Are you using any of that technology on there for you to actually understand what are the trends in your organization? How can you surface content for people in those tools? And I'll talk about that specifically and what you can do. And you by no means need to be a tech genius to do that. It's just about being tech savvy and really understanding how can you convert these really powerful tools that we all have and step outside that zone of the general 10% and say, what can I do with that to not only help my organization, but what can I do with that as well to actually help my own workflow as an L&D person? So, Gartner. God, I love a bit of Gartner, honestly. So, for more research, and this is just before the pandemic, so pre-pandemic, I'm not too sure if we're after the pandemic yet or post-pandemic. I don't know if there's a notice about that at some point to let us know. But this is basically from 2019 to 2021. What Gartner found is those collaboration tools, so Slack and Microsoft Teams, had a 44% rise in use across their clients that they work with. That makes sense, right? Because one day we were in an office, the next day we were all at home, and all of a sudden we had to figure out these tools that have kind of always been there, but we've not had to rely on to the extent that we rely onto them now. And what's really interesting for me, and maybe you'll spot this already by looking at this data here, is that we can see increases all across the board in the digital workplace. There's only one thing that we can't see an increase with in the digital workplace, and that is the learning technology that people are using today. So over these years, what we're seeing is people are coming to collaboration tools, they're using their sharing tools, they're looking to surface content here. I cannot tell you how many people come to me and say, why can't I find it in Slack, Ross? Why can't I get the answers that I want here? Why is there not an integration that helps me take the content from there? I don't want to go to some website that you're making me go to and log into. And this is a problem, right? Because I'm seeing more and more of this with more organizations I talk to, more data that I see it in my own world, is that all of this is being used more often. But here, people aren't doing it. People don't want to use it. So what can we do about that? How can we help people still surface content, still get answers to their questions, and use all of this good stuff? So my good friend Jeff here was equally as confused as I was on the day that we locked down, pretty much. And I was in this space where we just introduced Zoom at my organization. It was like, this is very, very exciting. We've got this thing called Zoom. Don't really know what it does at the moment in time. Not really having to use it because we're in the office all the time, which is great. So that was like Tuesday afternoon, right? And then Wednesday morning, it quickly, for me and my team, descended into, what is going on? What is this Zoom thing? We're all locked down. I have to talk to people. I can't unmute people. I don't know how to use this thing. You know, help me. I mean, the cries of help that I had over the first few months were ridiculous for a video conferencing tool. And the funniest thing to me was I had one revelation where I knew I had to do something, where I was sitting on a meeting with 40 people, and I put people into a breakout room, and you would have thought it was the second coming of Christ. People were so excited. They were like, oh my God, there's this feature here that we can do this. Don't even get me started on polls. When polls came in, I thought the whole place was going to burn down at some point. But this is what I mean. People were telling me, we can't have interactivity. We can't connect with each other. We can't get the data that we want. But they're not willing to investigate what the tools can do. They're quite easy to say, okay, this is video conferencing. It's just going to be another video tool, and that's it. And I see it across the state. You know, I've used Teams, I've used Slack, and I see the same thing again and again. It only does this. I need to go buy another flashy new tool that's going to cost us £500,000 and sign up for a 2-year contract because this can't do what I want. Instead of investigating, actually, what could the potential be? And we'll talk about how you can do that in your organization and the best people to talk about that too. So let me share a few more stories and some ideas that I have found really helpful in my own work and have found with other people as well. So a couple of things I'm sure you're already doing. So when I'm talking about surfacing content to people outside of kind of the learning technology that we're trying to push them to, so instead of using tools like Teams and Slack just as a marketing channel, actually what can you do to surface content in there? So some of the things that we've found really useful where I am right now is creating specific groups that are focused on learning topics. So example for new starters, for people, we have something called a learning lounge at the moment, where it's got about 400 people sitting on there, sharing ideas, basically doing the promise of social learning that people were talking about many, many years ago. We have leadership development, we have management development. It's getting people to actually, how can we bring those conversations and community of practice into those spaces which collaboration platforms are built for? Because historically what's happened in the L&D space is we try to push those out elsewhere. We try to say to people, you need to go to our LMS or whatever piece of technology you're using to actually do that. So there's some pieces there where you can get some very, very quick wins on how can I create that community feeling in these tools. And a lot of these tools now, and I can speak to Slack because I have much more experience with Slack at the moment, you've got audio huddles, you've got video meetings, you've got all this ability to track, you've got bots to do projects, all of this stuff where you can use it for a lot more than just messaging, pretty much. And then outside of that, so when I come to think about what we can all do as L&D operators, so for a long time in my role, probably like some of you here, I've sat as an individual contributor. I've been head of learning, but learning is me. That is it. If I don't turn up the next day, there is no more L&D department. That's pretty much it. So I've had to find ways to actually get super inventive and think about, if there's no other humans here to help me do what I need to do, how am I actually going to scale all the stuff that I do? Now, of course, with that, I'm a techie geek. Some people will know who are here already. So automation and making the most of this tech is incredibly important. So there are opportunities in tools like Teams and in Slack, as an example. I don't know why my screen has disappeared. And in Slack, where you can actually use components like bots, you can use autoresponders. I'll give you an example of that. Something that's been very, very beneficial in my work is the ability to get people the information they want when they ask for it. So an example of that is if someone jumps into a Slack channel and pretty much says, I'm looking to understand about feedback for our upcoming performance reviews. Now, what would generally have to happen is a human would have to engage with that. I'd have to pop up at some point when I go through my 200 Slack messages and say, okay, I'm going to get back to you. And that person might wait days for that. Now, what you can do instead in a tool like Slack is either use the inbuilt Slack bot to give autoresponders, And actually, when that Slack bot comes up and says, hey, I've seen this keyword here, you're looking for this, here's some great content to help you, and it helps answer that user's question in the moment instead of waiting for me 2 days later to turn up and organically, but then eventually answer that question. And there's opportunities to use components like that with bots. And like I say, this is not world-changing. You can do this quite easily. With a quick Google search, you'll be able to find out how to configure that in those tools. You can use workflows as well. So actually, how many of you are Slack users here? Okay, so how many of you are Teams users? Yeah, that makes sense. So you can do this on both, right? So there's an opportunity where, and again, on Teams, you can have integrations into that. You can have bots on that as well. You can build in workflows. And some of you might already be using these for your kind of project work and that. But actually, as an L&D professional, there are opportunities to either work with organizations or on your own to actually build out these components, these workflows, and these bots to help you. I'm not saying you need to have any kind of computer science degree to do this, but there is capability within these tools to help you and actually build out your capability to answer these problems and set this stuff up. So it's really about thinking differently. How do we investigate the capabilities of the technology that we've already got? I mean, Microsoft Teams, for all of you right now, is a prime example, right? We have Microsoft Viva, which has been rolling out. We have Microsoft everything, probably Microsoft Coffee at some point that will come to Teams at some avenue there. So there's always a time where you've got a very, very big product there, but I still believe and I still see people trying to buy more products on top of that product, even though it has all that feature set there. And that causes an issue. And it causes an issue because you're introducing new technology to users. You're asking them to take on another bit of technology. You're also looking at finances. ROI is incredibly important, right? To get a sign off there from your organization to get yet another new tool, which you're now saying, this is going to be the one that's going to fix all that stuff. Doesn't always work. So we have to get smarter in terms of looking at our technology estates and really appreciating what already exists there. What can we use in the organization? And then for yourselves, how can you, as an L&D professional, understand how these tools work to help your career as well? Because one thing that's been super beneficial for my career, and probably part of the reason why I'm standing in front of you today and talking, is the fact that I've been able to use a lot of this technology to actually help me do the things that I need to do. So a lot of our onboarding programs where I am, leadership development programs, 80% of it is run on automation. I don't touch it. I come in, I do some experiences with people, but in terms of the way people interact with surfacing our content, building out the strategy around that content, making sure they get the right stuff, I've actually built that into a kind of very nice for me automated piece, so it makes it a lot more easier for me to be effective in my organization. And as my team's grown, it's been great because there's more people there, but especially when you're a one-person shop, you have to find those ways to actually build out. But you can scale that technology as you go on for yourself and for your teams as well. And we'll talk more about this as I go through. So I want to do a very, very quick check-in here. So I've said a bunch of stuff already. So what can you do to help people in your organization be smarter with tech today? So you've heard me talk about a few things. So I'd love for you just to share some ideas and think about what are some of the things that, knowing your technology estate right now, what could you do to help people be smarter with what they've already got? Yeah, you could definitely install Neuralink. Google Workspace, yeah, I love Google Workspace. Cool. I don't like Google Workspace thing, I should say actually. So all of the tools that you're using today, Slack, Teams, whatever, you generally find they've all got free learning libraries of content. So to give you an example, you can go onto Google right now. There's Google Digital Workspace. Microsoft provide a full suite of education for all of their products as well. You don't need to create new stuff. You can curate all of this stuff, and you can put it in one place to service people. So when someone turns around and says, how do I set up my own kind of channel in Teams? How do I put my integration into that? You can help people with that. You can take these toolkits that are readily available and bring them out to people. And that is something, again, that I forgot to mention that was incredibly beneficial at the start of the pandemic for me and my team. Because as you can imagine, I had a bunch of people going crazy about Zoom. And then Miro came in, and I thought the whole world was going to fall apart at one point, where people are like, oh my God, there's an online collaboration whiteboard. How do we use that? How do we use that effectively? How do we connect with big teams? We've got big product and tech teams who are working on big problems. How do we make sure that all of those are getting the time they need, they're getting everything together, and they're not having to have 5 separate calls for one session? So it's also making sure that we can do that through all of the content that's available and saving those people time as well, because obviously time is precious, money is precious too. My Mac is just not loving this right now, is it, honestly? So look, it's really good to see there's loads of answers there in terms of what you can do. And what I'll also do is some links at the end. I've put together a bunch of free toolkits that you can take and use at your organization if you want to, that I've curated from Google, Microsoft, and loads of other companies, because they're basically the things that we've been using over the years where I am. They've been super beneficial, so I like to share the love, so it'll be there for you to all pick those up as well and take that too. And a very important part of all of this being smarter with tech, and I'm going to kind of sum it up into this kind of piece here, is actually looking at, before you go and buy something, and when you're having these conversations and everyone's getting super excited, you might be looking at performance management as an example. You might think, oh great, we can go out and buy a flashy new tool that's going to do everything and it's going to really kind of change what we've got now. There's a couple of things that you can do to actually help yourself understand what is available today. So one of those things, and I would definitely recommend, is making best friends with your technology team, specifically your infrastructure teams, and also making good friends with your marketing teams as well. And I'll explain why, because those are the people that can help you scout the technology that you've already got. Something that's been very beneficial to me where I am at the moment is to have a close link with our technology infrastructure teams to say, hey, we're working on this program of work, we're doing these things here to help people upskill. What have we already got? Before I go out and start talking to 10 or 15 vendors about everything they've got there, what is actually available for us to use that we're not using to its full potential right now? So scouting is incredibly important before you even think about going to contact people. And then investigating. So you may be using a bunch of stuff now that I spoke about with Slack and Teams and other tools, but making sure to investigate what is the full feature set that you've got there. You might be using the tool now and you might only be using one component of it, but actually investigating all the components that it offers. And a lot of these companies now, you'll actually find, Teams being an example there are so many add-ons. There are so many additional benefits that you can bring in, and you may never have to go out and find something else to add into your tool. You may find what you've already got. And then the final bit is to reflect. And I say reflect because those 2 stages, you might go through them, but you might get to the conclusion, you know what, we don't have what we need. We've done the scouting, we've investigated the tech we've already got, but you know what? It doesn't fill the need that we have for our users. So you need to bring in another product. And that's fine, right? But that's the stage you should get to once you've done those first 2 bits there and really understand, can we already use something that we've got? So people already familiar with that technology, we're not having to engage them back into that again, and we're not having to spend more money as well. And the reason why this is super important, because I like to think about mindful acquisition. I think numbers always work very well, don't they? So this data comes from a company called Hollow IQ. And basically, they were speaking about EdTech overall, and this is in 2020. And the industry is huge, right? There's a bunch of vendors out there right now. There's probably people in here as well that are from vendors too. There is so much tech out there. Literally, my LinkedIn mailbox, I can't even look at it anymore, because so many people are trying to tell me they have the tool that is going to rock my world and they need to speak to me right now. So if you have LinkedIn, message me. I'm sorry, I've probably not looked at it in about 6 months to get back. But the reason why that is because, and the reason why it's really important about mindful acquisition is because you can see here, it's going to keep blowing up and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there needs to be a bit of mindfulness brought into how can we have intention in what we're using, in what we're buying, and what we're deploying for people as well. And I'll share all this data as well after this session too, should you want to kind of go through it and use it for your own stuff as well. And there is a slide there, but I've got my computer on dark mode, so you're not going to see it. So I'll share that with you afterwards, but there is a slide there beneath there which talks about a learning tech stack. So look, I'm going to kind of bring it up and summarize some of it here and give some time for questions. So I did promise we'll have some time for questions. Out of everything that I've said today, these are the things that I'd really kind of love to take away, and I can explore more of these in the Q&A as well, is to look at, teach people how to build and where to learn with a digital skills library. So how are you able to connect people in with content that already exists? One of the big problems that I already had near the beginning of the pandemic was I thought I had to create everything from scratch. Because all of a sudden, one day we weren't using 90% of the tech stack, and then the next day we were. And we're having to figure out how do we help people with that. But like I say, if you can teach people how to build all this stuff and how to find the resources, it would be great. Scout before you buy. So I always say this to my team, do we have what we already need to do the job? So making sure you're going through that process, actually analysing and doing that scouting piece to understand what is the feature set, what is the functionalities of all of the technology that we have today? Are we missing something here? Do we have the ability to take something now and use another portion of that? And effectively, and I say this as an L&D person in the same field as all of us here, is we've got to practice what we preach. So it's all good me talking about tech and do this with tech and do that, but if I didn't live and breathe it, if I'm not showing my organisation that this is how to use workflows, this is how to use bots, this is how to use automation, then pretty much it's not going to work. So I have to walk the walk and show that in my own team and in my own organisation, and then also looking at, upgrading my skills. Because like I say, from a career perspective in L&D, if I could share anything with anyone, it is the fact that having the ability to understand digital technology, how it works, how it connects as part of that HR ecosystem, and how it can enable, each individual, enable me in my career, has been the really big win. And I think I only see that getting bigger, right? Because we see so much technology in the artificial intelligence space. We're seeing people get in their self with avatars now and digital training. We're seeing VR coming through. We're seeing, deep fakes coming through. I saw the other day as well, a load of deep fake technology. There's so much tech coming up. So what we need to do is kind of understand that landscape and look at how can we make sense of that chaos. So that is all I wanted to talk to you today about, folks. So last few things, if you want to connect with me / stalk me, you can do that in a few areas. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and you can also come to my blog if you wish to steal these thoughts, where all of this data is available. All of the tools that I mentioned around toolkits and all of that stuff is available too. So if you just scan that, that will take you to my link tree of all those links, and you can discover that stuff. And of course, I'll make sure to get this circulated around as well if you want that, and take a look at that. But that is everything from me, folks. I hope that's been really helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions now, because I can see a mic wandering around.
Indeed there is, yes indeed. Just not get in the way of the cameras there for a second. Right, people, it's your opportunity to ask questions, interrogate him madly.
Who would like interrogate me, yeah.
Yeah. Who would like to? There she is, she's straight in. Here we go, smashing stuff. Okay, speak nice.
I don't know if I need the mic, but maybe. So one of the suggestions, it's really a question about some advice. One of the suggestions that you had for using Slack and Teams is to create sort of local communities of thought, to make it a little bit smaller and make people have like subjects that they can relate to, etc. But I find we've done that in my organization, and we did that maybe 2 years ago, and it's just what happened was we have like one main chat group that everything is now just turned into, because there's so many different groups and they're named so many different sort of unobvious things that people didn't know where to post comments. So how do you sort of, and I think that may go to a bigger issue, is that we're hot and heavy out the box, and we set up things, but how do you maintain that technology and sort of continue to use it to its fullest, rather than it being a big bang and then sort of teetering off?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I suppose I call it the dreaded 6-week wonder that I see all the time, where people launch something or they put in a new bit of tech and it's amazing for 6 weeks and then no one hears about it again all those years later. So I think from the community perspective, something that has been incredibly helpful was talking to my kind of content marketing teams. I'm very blessed where I am. We have amazing marketing and brand teams, and really understanding more of how do we set out a plan of kind of content strategy and engagement on. So when we create these groups, how do we give people value, but actually how do we also put structure in place? And of course, structure in place also takes human intervention, right? So if you want people to not, and it happens, right? They descend into completely different conversations. Then we have kind of, I don't want to call them moderators because it sounds really harsh, but we have people there that try and bring the conversation back in and kind of have the guidelines on. We use this area to specifically talk about leadership development, or we have another group that specifically focuses on career development. But that is not kind of instant journey, that takes time. I'd say I worked with my kind of content team and understanding how do we build that out. And I think, to be quite honest, it's only kind of been maybe the last 6 months, after about a year, that we've really seen the kind of rewards from doing that work, because naturally people just do what humans do, right? They just kind of do whatever and start asking lots of questions. So I think having structure in place to be really clear on what are these channels specifically for, what do we share? Not too dissimilar to when you have, I don't know if any of you use Reddit or Facebook groups where there's kind of stuff on there where it's to be really clear on what do we talk about here, you know, what are the things that we want to be focusing on, you know, what do we share? But then definitely behind that as a team, having that content strategy to say, how do we on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, keep people engaged, feed people with content so they understand that the brand for this channel is, as an example, you know, going back to leadership development there and really focusing on those components. There's always going to be outliers in terms of that, but I think from the community perspective, it's doing that. But that definitely takes time. It's not something where you're going to walk away today and start doing it. It's going to happen in a number of weeks. It's something where you kind of start to build that and put it in place, and over time, people really start to understand what those, you know, groups are for and how they adapt and flex. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Do you do sort of like a yearly purge and get rid of some of them? Because it just feels like they just keep growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And it's also the human element.
Yeah.
The people start their own
Yeah.
with great ideas.
Yeah.
Talk about learning.
Yeah, so to that point, so what I definitely do every 6 months, there is definitely a review on how popular a channel is. So if you're on Slack or Teams, you can get integrations from an analytics standpoint where you can understand how many people visit, how many clicks they're doing on resources, how many conversations are happening. So we take a holistic view there, and then we'll definitely say, you know, it depends how many channels there are at that point. If it is getting out of control and we can see like there's like 4 that are dead, then, you know, we're going to get rid of them. But to your point is when you put a good point about user-generated ones. So very naturally, and I might find this because it's in the tech world, is that people do generally kind of create their own stuff. So what I try to do, or what I have done as a team, is instead of saying, we're L&D, you can't do that, and you know we have to own that. Actually, what we've done is empowered those groups and said, what do you need help with? What can we do for you? How can we help you with structure and all the rest of that stuff there? And then we continue to do that. So it's definitely not a bad thing if other people, I want them to do it. Like, I'm very happy when someone's like, I want to create a channel about, you know, something to do with product engineering. I'm like, yes, thank God, like someone's going to do that, and then our team can support that. So yeah, it's taking that approach, as you say, is in looking at what's working, what's not working, and then, you know, when you need to cut out the stuff that's not working, right? Because especially depending on the size of your team, you can't invest more time and more money in something that's not actually providing the ROI that you want it to. Cool.
Awesome question. Great stuff. Who's next? Oh, he's in. Right, hang on. It's always on the other side of the room, though, isn't it? It always is. Never fails. Never fails.
Thank you. Great session, by the way. Thank you. Adam
Thanks.
from AstraZeneca here. One comment and then a bit of a question. Your scout before you buy, I think, was really powerful. We, as an organization, have spent a lot of time collaborating with teams across, you know, I'm here today with my colleague in HR, I'm in HR, I've got IT here as well, partnering with procurement and other areas of the business to really ensure we are doing the due diligence that's required to find internally first a solution for a requirement and then looking outside. So I couldn't agree with that more. Collaboration with IT, with procurement, with all of these different teams is critical to success, absolutely. So that was just my comment, but I did have a question for you. Calling on your techie side, right, and your interest in that space, what excites you about what's coming?
Oh, good question. What excites me? Bloody hell. I think, so there's a few things that excite me, but there's also a few things that I'm fearful of at the same time as well, in terms of their intent. So the things that excite me and something that I think long about at the moment is this kind of content piece of, I find a lot of people that I speak to in the industry, we're overwhelmed by content now. Like, it's come to a space where if we think about 10, 15 years ago, it was like, we haven't got anything to give people, there's no content. And it's kind of with the Netflix thing, right, of all the streamers. You know, once there was Netflix and it was it, and all of a sudden there's about 50 odd streamers now, and you're trying to figure out, you know, what I'm going to use. And I think I'm really excited about how do we make sense of all the content that we've got, because one of the top 3 things I always encounter is, so I'll give you an example. go onto Google and you search for leadership, you get 20,000 results, right? And it's like, but how do we help people understand where you are right now, what's relevant for me? And I see that in organization. I see that in my own organization. And I haven't kind of cracked that thing yet, because everyone's got loads of content libraries, which is cool. You know, the quality of them, we sometimes have to figure out. I think what really excites me is the kind of, you know, whatever is the next wave of artificial intelligence that really helps us understand if I, as Ross, am interacting with this tool and it understands, you know, roughly my experience level, what is my job in the organization, and what are the things that I'm working on, how is it able to surface the right content for me, instead of me going, here's 500 pieces of content, and me trying to figure out what's right. Now, the vendors outside will hate me for saying that, because obviously they want all the content libraries, which I get. But there's a piece in there where at some point we're just going to crash because there's so much content and we're trying to figure that out. So that excites me. I'm curious and fearful about the metaverse. So I'm curious because, look, I'm a techie geek and I love that kind of stuff, and the kind of digital world is very interesting. I'm fearful because, one, no one seems to have legs in the metaverse, for one, which I still find very weird when there's people just legless kind of walking around and doing all that stuff. But there's also the second bit about the human connection. I think what makes L&D and growth and humanity in general really interesting is the ability to be in rooms like this and talk to people and learn from each other and do that. And I think with the kind of real push with, you know, metaverses and virtual reality, and I should say, look, metaverses have already existed. If you're a gamer, you know, gaming has been doing it for many, many years and creating all those things. But I think there's some interesting bits, and there was a really interesting case study at PepsiCo, where basically they wanted to teach their staff, it was something in the warehouse, and they used Minecraft. So their director of L&D, his little 11-year-old boy was obsessed with Minecraft. And for whatever reason, they were having a conversation one day, and he thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could train our staff, I think it was in the warehouse facility, about how to do these things. And they've actually launched a big program using Minecraft to train people. And I think that's one of the first things where I think, okay, that's an interesting use. You know, that's not a, let's put on some massive, gigantic goggles and walk around doing this and try and figure out what we're doing. That's actually going, there's an application there. You know, people can do that. I'm seeing more companies do that now. So I'm excited by that, but I'm also fearful of it. But that is always the same question of how, as a society, do we use that? What's the intent behind that? Because it's one of those things, again, where, you know, it could be great, it can be an enabler, but it could also be another thing where it just becomes another one of those pieces of tech we're not quite sure what to do with. So, yeah, I'm excited about those bits, really, in general.
Awesome. Minecraft. I'm going to have to take that back to my niece. She'll be absolutely staggered. Anybody else got a question? Now's your time. Shout them out. Don't be shy. Oh, she's back. Right. Hang on. Yeah, you're going to make me get my steps in now, aren't you? Right, hang on. Here we go.
So thinking about, I guess, Ross, you may be like an anomaly in L&D world, because not everyone is sort of a digital native or really into tech.
Yeah.
How can people who aren't, let's say, that into tech, how can we go about getting updates on products and sort of, you know, learning about the new functionality other than like having to research it yourself?
Yeah.
Should we go back to the vendor and ask for demos and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
what
I think
can you do
there's a couple
proactively?
of things of that. I think from a vendor perspective, I always like to look at any vendors I work with, it's a small amount, as I kind of treat them as partners. So what I really want to understand is, what is the roadmap that you're working on? And, you know, what are the things that you're bringing into that roadmap? And, you know, can we influence that? Can I understand more before those features get launched on the roadmap, what they are and what they'll do? So then ahead of time with the team, I can really understand how can we use some of that. So I think, look, if you've got loads of vendors today, you know, make sure you're getting your money's worth in terms of understanding what is your product roadmap. So that's a number one question whenever you speak to anyone, is looking at, you know, what's coming up, what are the features that are coming in. You know, you've got so many companies doing different things. You really want to understand what's your vendor providing for you to get best value for money. So that's one thing you can do, of course, in the learning tech space. I think in the general space, I think, and again, I work in a tech company, right? So it's a bit different. So something I found very good is just generally being curious to the tech team and understanding, you know, how are they using some of the tools that they've already got now? Because generally they are the people that are at the cutting edge or the forefront. And it's understanding some of the things they might be doing in technology, some of the things they might be doing in marketing, and saying, oh, we could use it in L&D. So that, I mean, marketing and L&D has been spoken about for a long time, but the way that marketing are using some of their kind of technology for automations and engaging people, I've been able to bring that into my world because I'm having conversations with those people and really understand, oh, that's cool. How does that work? Could we use it over here? So I think in some ways it's just about, yes, it's being curious, but it's just talking to those people and understanding, what are they using? And I think outside of that, of course, there's the usual stuff with, look, there's blogs out there and stuff, there's video updates and that. I mean, the Microsoft one I mentioned earlier on, they've got a massive presentation online recorded from yesterday where they're talking about wanting to take over the world with the metaverse and their goggles at the moment. So there's stuff like that. But I think the main thing is, and I really want to get across, because you're probably right, I'm a bit of an anomaly, where you don't have to be a tech expert. It's just about being a bit savvy and understanding that. And it's the same for all of us, even in our personal times, right? Like I'll give you a prime example. I've got loads of friends that work at TikTok. I have no idea what is going on with TikTok. I haven't got TikTok on my phone. I want no part of TikTok. I feel way too old for it, right? But I understand it. I still know what it is. I still know on the basis of how the business model works, the algorithm, how it's engaging people. So I don't embrace it as a user. I have an understanding of maybe in the future that could be something that kind of reaps benefits in the work that I'm doing. So it's just more being curious about it. You don't have to be a user of everything, but just understanding the kind of playing field you're in pretty much.
Awesome stuff. Right, who's going to make me go to the other side of the room? Any more questions? It's a great opportunity to really pick his brains. Ross, while somebody's thinking about a question, do you maybe want to remind people how they can get in touch with you and connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I've lost my little thing on my Mac's died, obviously. So you can get hold of me, like I said, on LinkedIn. I'm just Ross Stevenson UK. You can find me on there. Twitter, I haven't got a clue what my username is. It's probably dreadful, to be honest. But you'll find it on my kind of links there as well. And for everything else, let's see if this works here, you can go to stillthesethoughts.com as well, which has all of those free toolkits and everything else. So yeah, if you want to connect on there, folks, please do that. You can come find me afterwards and we can have a chat as well. But yeah, that's where you can come find me and find out more about all this kind of crazy stuff that I'm doing and experiments in that. But look, I hope that's been helpful. I hope you can take away something from that. That's the main thing, and put it into your own kind of workflow. So thanks for coming and spending some time.
Awesome stuff. Everybody.
Cheers.